And Melinda, congratulations on your last day, by the way, with Coaches Console. I know it's a new day for you, and we're happy to support you in your journey. And for those that don't know, Melinda is one of our in-house trainers for our EMTs, an absolute legend in what she does. And again, she's embracing uncertainty to walk a new path. And I send her the best of my love and support for that as well. Melinda says, I'm listening to the June 17 Q&A recording, and the question Dora asked about eliminating or limiting beliefs to become less triggered sparked something. In part, your response, you said that the day you graduate Earth School, expect to bust because you've graduated. You don't need to be here. That reminder brought a great deal of relief, as the past few days I've been inside the grief of a colleague who took his own life. I've been having a simultaneous experience of grief and gratitude as I reflect on the time that I knew him. I was on a call with several colleagues this past weekend to come together in our shared grieving and to remember him. And I was listening to other people's take on suicide. Judgment, bad, equals, and I felt it was like a very to me reaction, as in, how can you do this to me? Or, I'm sorry he was so lost that he didn't feel he had another choice. Again, a very to me sounding reaction. I observed feeling a slightly different response. My experience felt like an honoring of the journey that his soul, the one holding the joystick in his movie or game of life, chose out of all the unlimited possibilities it could choose. And in the recording, when you were responding to Dora's question, I heard you say, you graduated, you don't need to be here. And I thought to myself, well done, John, you graduated. And I thought his suicide was his bus. However, I can feel myself in a bit of a tug of war between someone, their character and human self, feeling so lost and hopeless that they end their existence, versus someone, in the spirit of choosing when they're ready to graduate, selecting suicide as a way they choose to graduate. I'd love your perspective. Great question, and I certainly can give some insight here. This is a little bit more advanced, a little bit more profound, but I'll share it. When Dr. Hawkins muscle tested, and we'll get into this in later in the advanced levels. And for muscle testing, you can call it tuned into truth. Let's call it that way. There is a applied kinesiology science that you can use when you're at a high enough level of consciousness. You get binary feedback from the universe on truth versus falsehood. Let's leave that for now. If you read Power versus Force, we do a dissertation on that in some of the advanced modules. But let's just say that when he tuned in to say and ask the question, do we choose the time of exit before we come? The answer that is given is yes. Now, what comes up for me on that is, if you choose as an actor a movie, does that movie have a final scene? If you're in Hollywood, you take a script, is there a final scene scripted in that movie? Of course. Can you act past that final scene even if you want to? No. The next question was interesting. The next question was, do we get to choose how we exit? And the answer to that came back as no. And the reason for that is because we get to make choices along the way. That's how the system grows. You can choose to smoke 20 cigarettes a day, and that will likely have an impact on how you exit your movie if you don't smoke 20 cigarettes a day. You follow? You can choose to be angry and upset and flood your body with cortisol chronically, and that may have an impact on how your movie ends. Again, drama versus comedy. Action-adventure movie, hero's journey versus victim. You get the idea. Now, when it comes to suicide, there is a different nuance. If you're acting in Hollywood, let's just stick with this metaphor because it's a very strong corollary. You accept the script. It may be a tough script. Some of you grew up and your early part of your movie was tough. Dad was an alcoholic. Mom didn't love you. Whatever it is, fill in the blank. But that was a tough script to test your acting ability. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. So likely you could help others downstream or grow muscles that you hadn't grown before. If you don't like the movie that you're currently filming, let's go back to Hollywood, you've signed the contract. Is anybody forcing you to show up next day on set? Ultimately, yes, you've got a contract. Yes, you've agreed to do it. But if you want to walk off set, do you have the free will to do so? Yes. Is it going to negatively impact your acting career? Most likely. When there's some book recommendations coming downstream towards the end of this program that really help you correlate the relationship to scientifically, what's on the other side of this movie, what's behind the camera rather than us currently in front of it. All of the feedback, shall we say, that we've had around suicide is that there's two types of exit. One where, like with the relationship, you run away from pain because you don't want to learn the lesson, in which case the lesson will likely repeat. In the relationship sense, with the next idiot that you attract, the next narcissistic person you attract, the next selfish idiot you attract, whatever it may be, the next person that breaks your heart, the next person that betrays your values, whatever it is, you didn't learn the lesson. You flip somebody off in traffic, more people are going to flip you off and cut you off in traffic, right? So there's that. If you quit the movie because you don't like the lesson you ultimately signed up for, or you don't have the tools, or you didn't have the support, and it's tough and you just can't hang it in there, you don't have a compelling future, by all accounts, and there are many of them, of people that die and come back, or people that under regression have passed away, committed suicide in previous movies, and have said what was the result of that. You're going to get the same kind of lesson. If I had a very close friend and a member of our EMT community, Patrick, 2 months ago, chose suicide. He chose voluntary euthanasia and was in a country that would allow him to do that. And it was a short decision. The reason he chose that was not because of a lack of courage, not because he was in so much physical pain after so many decades of fighting cancer and it coming back and trying everything. And the latest hope that he had suddenly got dashed and he found himself regressing. He said to me, he says, "I'm not afraid of death, but I am afraid of continuous physical suffering. And I just can't do it anymore." Under those scenarios, the feedback is you get a pass out of the game. No? The vast majority of suicides aren't the pass out of the game. Now, what we can do to help them on wherever they've gone, on their movie debrief, on their next trip back to acting school before they get their next part, however you want to frame it, is we can send them love from this side. And we can be grateful that we weren't in that movie, that they had a tough script. And hold a space that the next time they find the courage, they find the resources, they find the on-set acting coach that can help them get through some of the tough parts of their movie. That's the best we can do. You can process feeling sad. That's a natural part of human grieving. If you bottle that up, it's like a water balloon. You squeeze it, or an air balloon. You squeeze a balloon here, it's going to come out somewhere else. That's suppression on feelings doesn't work. It's just bottle up and find different ways of exiting. So when it comes to grief, you have to process. One of our EMT members here on EMF 48, recently lost her mum, and felt like there was almost a requirement to go through module 4 and have it processed. It was too soon. You had come to terms with understanding as humans with our levels of social attachment, especially a parent or a close friend or a partner, someone you've shared that time. There is a level of grieving that is required in order to process those emotions. And it takes a lot more than a 60-second allow it to happen or squeeze the shoulder and write the stuff. It can help. When my mother passed away, I had 3 weeks of being on my own in the UK. Shared the story. I just let go of my then fiance, Eileen. It was a relationship that I learned a lot from in terms of how not to deal with dysfunction. But my mum really felt that her boy was getting married and she was so happy, and she was dying of cancer. We thought we were trying to save it. I didn't understand importance back then as I do now. I tried everything to fix it and buy me. All right. But when I went over to see my mom, when she took a turn for the worse, she was in hospital, and I just made the courageous, for me at the time, decision to split. And I went over and I didn't want to tell my mom, but I couldn't lie. And she asked me, "Oh, how's Eileen?" And I'm like, "Mom, we're not getting married. We've split." And I had to hold the space of knowing that the last thing my mom needs to hear here is something that's going to make her sad. That's not going to help the cancer. And she came back as only a mother can to say, "Yeah, I knew she wasn't the right one." You know, the relief that I felt. But my mom passed away 2 days later, day after my birthday. Yeah, the early hours of June 15th, yeah, and pretty much 14th. And I had nobody. I really, really wanted to reconnect with my ex at that point, and I had to make a courageous decision that I wouldn't even let her come to the funeral. Why? Because I was so empty. It was my last living close relative. I'd never known life without parents. Don't have brothers or siblings or anything like that. No aunts, uncles, cousins, no grandparents. It's like I had nothing, and the gap was so big. But that was a massive courage to say, "You can't come over," because I know I'd have reconnected for the wrong reasons. As I said, you could have put a polar bear in bed next to me and I'd have cuddled it all night. I was so empty, right? So that required a process of grieving. And that was tough because I was on my own. I had distractions. I had to handle probate and emptying, mum's wardrobe and charity shops and dealing with, gas bills and disconnecting, all this kind of stuff. But there was a process of grieving that I had to go through. I couldn't just dismiss it. I couldn't suppress it. I let myself cry as often as I needed, right? But when I came back and I started journaling, the awareness that it was clearly time for me to have was that if she chose the time to leave before she came, they wouldn't have chose that time if they didn't think I was ready to be on my own. And yes, it hurt. And yes, it sucked. And yes, there was a huge adjustment period. But I took a lot of comfort in the fact that that was almost like my graduation away from the nest. So you have to, if I'd have had that awareness the day of the funeral, it wouldn't have landed. Make sense? So you have to have a process where you sit within the emotions. You don't get led by the emotions, but you allow yourself to feel them. And that's perfectly okay. Where module 4 comes in is allowing you to let go of triggers that and wallowing in stuff that has already passed, but you keep bringing it up. There's been a time where it's naturally gone. Time heals all wounds unless you keep bringing the old into the now. So it's a shame, but we don't get to choose other people's exits. And if they want to leave the set, send them some love, because it was clearly a tough movie or a tough scene in the movie. We've all had tough scenes. We're probably going to get tough scenes. And hey, there for the grace of God go I.